Hi guys, good evening. Welcome back once again to the EdWord. I'm your host Eddie, and in tonight's video I will be doing my video review for the mid-season premiere of The Walking Dead, which has returned now with new episodes earlier tonight on AMC. I just got done watching the mid-season premiere. Oh man, talk about tearful goodbyes. Whew. Okay, before I keep going on and on, of course, and before I ruin anything for anybody who may have not seen this episode yet, please, for the love of God, if you're not caught up on The Walking Dead by the past couple episodes, or at least by this episode, do not keep watching or listening, as I will be going into giant spoilers, covering all the juicy details from tonight's episode, you know, from that one epic scene to that other super heartfelt goodbye. So spoilers from here on out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Spoiler time. So tonight was the mid-season premiere. You know, we got to see what our characters were going to do in the aftermath of destruction of Alexandria and of Carl's impending death, unfortunately. You know, what I loved about this episode is that it was a healthy balance of emotion and then war-driven action. I'm going to explain what that means. On the one hand, on the emotional side, we are having a very heartfelt, very sad, very deep goodbye between Rick and his son. This is his son who died, I should say. You know, the Carl was like one of the main reasons what kept Rick going all these years was about protecting Carl and later on Judith. So it became about protecting his children, but especially Carl. You know, Judith is supposedly Shane's Shane's daughter, but Rick has adopted her, which is great. But it's like Carl is his flesh and blood, his last flesh and blood. And it's just one of those things where you're like, how do you go on after losing someone so close? I mean, this is going to sound kind of bad, but I have not lost anybody incredibly close to me in a very long time. The last time it would have been, about 8 years ago when my grandmother passed. Old age, and she lived to be 88. Anyway, my point is that I can't imagine the emotional weight and magnitude of anyone losing anybody that close, but especially a parent losing a child. Usually it's the other way around, because the child is the future, the parent is the past. But in this case, a father losing his son, God, that must really suck. I mean, I can't relate. I don't have kids, but I can only imagine maybe I can't even imagine the pain. Just the pain and the anger and the rage and the sadness. Which, by the way, I feel was beautifully played by Andrew Lincoln in this episode. Also, Chandler Riggs. Huge shout out to Chandler Riggs. You know, not only doing a phenomenal job in this episode, but just for being there from day one. I mean, this kid was on the show since the pilot. He grew up during the span of this series, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, if you can look back and say, I grew up on a TV set, or especially I grew up on The Walking Dead, that's pretty awesome. I certainly hope he does well in his future. And I'm going to miss him. You know, I liked Carl. I really liked Carl. But, you know, anyway, so as I was saying, this episode had this great balance of, you've got this emotional farewell story for Carl, Rick, and Michonne, and on the other hand, you've got this rescue op with Morgan and Carol, two of the biggest badasses of the show, teaming up to save Ezekiel. And of course, Morgan is not shy about his bloodlust. And, it's just like they were going full Black Ops mode, and they were just gunning down saviors, and they were doing it real stealthy-like side by side. Oh, I loved it. I absolutely loved seeing them both go at it together. And I also love that one especially surprising scene where, Morgan is clearly trying to get this guy off of him, and then we see this big gaping hole in his chest, and you're like, okay, it's a gunshot wound. So he jabs his finger and like, oh, okay, well that'll injure him. That'll hurt the guy enough to get him off. Because I thought Morgan was just gonna jab his fingers in there and to get the guy off of him. But instead, he pulls out his goddamn intestines. I was like, what the hell, man? And even like Gavin, Carol, and Ezekiel, everybody in the room's just like, everybody's just watching in shock, just utter shock of Morgan literally ripping this guy's guts out. And he's just drenched in blood, and Gavin's face is in pure terror, which sends him running. And then Morgan just goes back into straight on kill mode. He's like, don't worry, I got this. And he just starts calmly walking after Gavin. It was just one of the biggest what the fuck moments in The Walking Dead. I mean, a living character, we've seen characters get ripped apart before by zombies. We've never seen a character ripped apart by another living human character until tonight. So I love that this episode was a healthy balance of emotion and action with a brand new thing thrown in the middle. The brand new thing being a living character killing another living character with extreme methods. In this case, literally digging his hand into the guy's gunshot wound and pulling his guts out through the hole. I mean, that's nasty, but kind of badass at the same time. In a life or death struggle, you're just like, oh, screw it. You're just like, wow, man. Ick. Ugh. God, what a great scene that was. That was truly an awesome sequence. Plus, this episode reminded us that the war is still ongoing, despite the loss of Carl. Our characters have a plan in play. Sounds like they're all regrouping at the hilltop. Well, at least what's left of them. And, this is just that, just Carl's final words to Rick and Michonne. First of all, we find out that these weird, confusing flash forwards that also look like a fantasy or a dream, everybody always thought those were Rick's. I mean, we saw that in the Comic-Con trailer, and we saw that in the season premiere back in October. We all assumed, and I was one of them, we all assumed, or at least most of us assumed, this is Rick's fantasy, or this is his escape from reality. He's envisioning a perfect world where everybody's alive and well, his children are growing up, and the community is prospering. We all assumed this was Rick's fantasy. It turns out this was Carl's dream or vision, whatever you want to call it, the whole time. He's the one who gave Rick the older bearded look, and he's the one who made Judith a little bit more grown up. The community's all working together, growing food, prospering. It's like a return to normality. And then to top it all off, in his fantasy includes a friendlier, less hostile-looking version of Negan. Negan's there, and he's on a first-name basis with Judith, and he's helping grow a garden. It's like, I doubt we're going to see that actually happen in real life. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Negan, but it's like in Carl's fantasy, he had so much hope that he could actually envision their worst enemy living and working together alongside him and his family. Carl was just so invested in the hope for the future that he was willing to even throw Negan in there as a potential ally, or at least just a mutual survivor, if that's what we want to call him. I mean, I was just blown away. I mean, Carl's vision or strength for hope in this episode just astounded me. When I saw Negan there, I was just like, no way. Carl would not have minded living with Negan. That's just mind-blowing to me. And, it was just, and then I loved the parallel to going way back to season 3 when he talks about killing the kid during the first governor attack. And then how things changed for them during season 4, about how they stopped killing, they started taking people in, and that's what helped Carl evolve and grow into the man that he ultimately became. And I love that. I love how they're echoing that sentiment, because that means it is possible for these characters, especially Rick, to turn to something that looks like normality or real life, regular, non-bloody, non-violent life after the war is over. Whether that means peace with the saviors or ending the saviors, it means that there is hope after all, that there's hope for life. And I love that that is the legacy that Carl's leaving behind. He's leaving behind these seeds or these ideas of hope that life can and will get better for our characters. And I think I love how his death was not without meaning, and I also loved how he handled his final hours and his final days. He spent time with his sister. He wrote goodbye letters to his dad, to Michonne, to everybody he cared about, and he got to say goodbye to them face to face. And he spent his time productively instead of crying and feeling sorry for himself. He dressed his wound. He patched it up. He took care of Sadiq. And then all that stuff happened. And then he started to succumb to his bite. So I am just in awe of how mature and how he so well handled his impending doom, all the way up to the final moments. And I'm not going to lie, in that final scene where we see Rick and Michonne waiting outside the burnt house, and we don't know if Carl's killed himself or not, and then we hear the muffled gunshot from the silencer, it made me jump a little bit. As they jumped on screen at the same time, I kind of jumped. I'm like, Jesus, oh God, he did it. Because I was kind of hoping, oh, okay, he's already killed himself because he had the silencer. But nope, they saved it for the big screen. And I was like, oh my God, it's just one of those moments that really takes you back to reality. Like, Jesus, this is really happening. He's really, and this is over for him. It's it. So, hell of a send-off, hell of an episode. I cannot wait to see what the rest of the season brings. I feel like the war is only going to continue to rage on from here. And I am really, really excited that this is a series